Welcome to Nomine Daemonium, where prayers become empty echoes and faith falls in the clutches of evil. The story is told below, the sound of cold rain like the whisper of souls not yet released. Where are you listening to the story? Is it in a dark room, an empty hallway, or are you curled up in a blanket, trying to shake off the feeling that someone is watching you? What time is it? 11 p.m.? Or is it past midnight, when the boundary between the living and the dead dissolves? Make sure you are in a safe place, because the story begins now. And once you enter, there is no turning back. Put on your headphones, take a deep breath, and join me on the journey of Father Elias, a priest lost in the darkness, where the light no longer shines. The wind howled through the cracks of the ancient bell tower, shrieking like the dying breath of a forgotten soul. In the heart of a forgotten village nestled between the fog-drenched Carpathian mountains, the church of St. Andres stood crooked and weather-beaten, its stones darkened by centuries of sorrow. Father Elias stepped from the shadowed archway, his heavy cassock trailing behind him like a cloak of mourning. His eyes, once soft and bright, now burned with the cold intensity of a man who had seen too much and believed even more. A leather-bound Bible rested in his left hand, and a crucifix of tarnished silver swung gently from his belt. He had arrived at dusk, summoned by a desperate letter from the village elder. "They come at night," it read, written in a shaking, blood-smeared script. The children vanish, the cattle rot on the hoof, the bells ring by themselves. As he crossed the churchyard, the dying light bled across the broken gravestones like spilled wine. Crows circled the belfry. The air smelled of wet earth and old blood. Inside the chapel, the scent of mold and candle wax hung thick. Rows of empty pews stretched before the altar, like forgotten souls waiting to be absolved. A single candle flickered at the pulpit, casting long, spidery shadows on the walls. Elias knelt and whispered a prayer in Latin, his voice hoarse. Then he heard it, a low clang. The bell above, silent for decades, tolled once, then twice. The villagers had told him no one dared enter the tower. Father Elias stood, eyes narrowed. "In nomine Patris," he muttered and climbed the spiral steps. Each creak of the old wood echoed like a scream. Cobwebs brushed his face. Cold fingers of wind slithered along the stairwell. As he reached the top, the bell swung gently, though there was no wind, and beneath it something moved. A girl, pale as bone, her eyes hollow, stood barefoot in the shadows. Blood smeared her dress. She smiled, a wide, unnatural smile. "Help me, Father," she whispered. "They took my soul." Before he could respond, her mouth split open far too wide. A scream erupted, not hers, but the cry of a dozen voices. The shadows twisted, forming grotesque shapes with too many limbs and eyes. Father Elias flung holy water and shouted, "Exorcizo te, omnis spiritus immundi." The thing shrieked, recoiled, and vanished with a burst of icy wind. The bell tolled once more, then fell silent. He descended the tower slowly, his hands shaking. The village had more secrets than it dared to confess, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, the village of Brevany was cloaked in a funeral hush. The fog hadn't lifted, it never did, and the sun was a pale disk behind a veil of clouds. Father Elias emerged from the church to find the villagers gathered in silence, their eyes wide with suspicion and fear. No one spoke, even the children did not cry. A man stepped forward, a stooped figure with a crooked cane and eyes clouded by age. This was Marek, the elder who had written the letter. "You saw it, didn't you?" Marek asked, voice brittle as dry leaves. Elias nodded slowly. She was already gone. Whatever wore her skin, it wasn't human. Marek made the sign of the cross and muttered, "God have mercy." Another villager, a pale woman with her head covered in a black shawl, spoke up. "It was Eliska. She vanished 2 winters ago." We thought the wolves got her." "It wasn't wolves," Elias replied grimly. "It was something older, something that feeds on grief." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Fear grew dense in the air. "The bell tolled last night," Marek said. "That means the hollow child is awakened again." Elias turned to him. "What is that?" Marek hesitated, then gestured toward the edge of the woods. "There's a place the children dare not go, a grove that never sees sunlight. The stories say a demon sleeps there, one that steals souls and replaces them with husks, empty shells that look like the children they once were." Elias's gaze hardened. "Then that's where I'm going." That evening he walked toward the cursed grove. The path was choked with dead leaves and thorns, as though the forest itself wished to keep him out. He pushed through, whispering psalms, his crucifix glowing faintly in the growing darkness. The grove was wrong, silent, too silent. No birds, no wind. Trees grew in a tight circle, their branches twisted together like claws. And in the center, a doll. Not a child, but a crude wooden thing, carved with a mouth stitched shut and eyes wide with horror. It hung from a branch by a noose of human hair. Elias approached, heart thundering. He reached out to touch it, and the air snapped with cold. Whispers surged around him. "Father, help us. Return us." The ground cracked open. Hands, small, childlike, skeletal, burst from the earth. Grotesque figures pulled themselves free, hollow-eyed, their mouths sewn shut. They reached for him. He backed away, flinging holy water, reciting verses. But they kept coming. Then the doll twitched. Its wooden eyes turned, and it screamed. Not a child's voice, but a cavernous roar filled with rage and agony. Trees shuddered. Darkness poured from the doll's mouth like smoke. A shape emerged, tall, lean, horned. Its eyes glowed red. Elias raised his Bible. "By the authority of Christ, I cast you out." The demon struck him with unseen force, flinging him into the trees. His ribs cracked, his vision swam. But as the shadows closed in, he reached for the crucifix. It burned like fire in his palm, and the light returned. Just for a moment, enough to drive the demon back into the earth, enough to save his soul. For now. Father Elias awoke on the floor of the chapel. The crucifix still burned faintly in his palm. The flesh blistered, but untouched by sin. Outside, dawn broke weakly through the ever-hanging mist. The bell of St. Andras was silent again, as if it had never rung. But something had changed. In the pews sat 3 villagers, wide-eyed and silent. Marek stood among them, pale and trembling. He approached as Elias struggled to sit up. "You survived," Marek whispered, voice cracking. "We feared the hollow child had taken you." "It tried," Elias said, wincing. "But it wasn't alone. There's something stronger beneath it, something older." He looked to his scorched hand. The crucifix had turned black at the edges. Marek helped him to his feet and offered a small flask. Elias drank, holy wine, spiced with herbs. It calmed the pain. "The children?" Elias asked. "The ones it took. Were they buried?" Marek hesitated. "Some, yes, others, we never found." Elias's voice grew cold. "Take me to one of their graves." They led him to the edge of the village cemetery where fog clung to crooked stones like moss. There, beneath a rotting wooden cross, lay a shallow grave. The name etched on the wood read, Lenka Dvorakova, age 8. Elias knelt. The ground was undisturbed, but he sensed it. Something wrong, something not at rest. He pressed his hand to the soil, whispered a prayer, and felt the chill. Then the soil cracked. A whisper rose up, not from the wind, but the earth itself. "Help!" It was Lenka's voice. The ground broke apart, not with violence, but like something reaching up. A small hand of bone and skin poked through. Elias reacted swiftly, scattering blessed salt and water over the grave. The hand withdrew, and the earth sealed once more. She's trapped, he said, but not wholly gone. Her soul still lingers. Marek nodded. That is what they do. The hollow steal them, but not all at once. It feeds slowly. That is why we sometimes see their faces, in dreams, in fog. Elias stared at the grave. We must find the source. Marek swallowed. There's a name, buried long ago, forbidden to speak, but it's tied to this evil. Say it, Elias demanded. The elder hesitated, then whispered, Veltinia. The name struck like a blow. The air around them chilled. Elias stood. That name is old, pre-Christian, a demon from the Black Forests. But what is it doing here? Marek looked away. There was a book. A heretic priest long ago brought it here. He was cast out, but the book remained. We buried it. Where? Elias asked sharply. But Marek only turned toward the chapel. You must not dig it up. The last priest who tried bled black from the eyes. Elias's voice dropped low. Then that's exactly what I need to do. That night, Elias returned to the church alone. Candlelight flickered against ancient stone as he descended into the crypt. The air thickened with every step. He found the old tomb sealed behind an iron gate. The lock was rusted shut, but he forced it open. Inside was a sarcophagus carved with symbols that predated the Bible. Beneath it, buried in layers of cloth and bone, was the book. He reached for it. His hand trembled. The leather binding was stitched with sinew, the title burned in a language no tongue should speak. And as his fingers touched it, his vision filled with ash and blood. He saw Veltinia, not as a creature, but as a void, a mouth with no face, endless teeth, endless hunger. And it saw him too. The visions faded, but Father Elias was not the same. He lay on the crypt floor, sweating, trembling, the cursed book still clenched in his hand. His eyes were bloodshot. The candle beside him flickered unnaturally, as if recoiling from the presence of the book. He rose slowly, breath ragged. The book had not merely shown him Veltinia. It had connected them. From now on, Elias would carry the scent of ash, a trace of shadow clinging to his soul. The risk was real, but so was the urgency. He had no choice. That night, as storm clouds gathered above St. Andres, Elias translated the first page of the heretical tome. The text writhed as he read, shifting in strange loops, but his training in ancient tongues steadied him. A name emerged, Wormhold, a place, a village, long forgotten, but Elias knew the name. He had seen it once, scrawled on the back of an exorcist's journal, torn, stained, and buried in the Vatican archives. The footnote read, Wormhold vanished in 1627, no record of survivors. The cause was marked, Infernus. Elias traced the letters with his thumb. He now understood. Wormhold was not merely a location. It was the first nest of Veltinia, a hamlet swallowed whole, erased from memory, and sealed in silence. He had to go there. The journey was not easy. The map held no trace of Wormhold. Local villagers refused to speak of it. Marek's hands shook when Elias asked, Do not seek it, Father. The road bends wrong. The trees do not grow straight. It's a place that hates being found. I know, Elias replied. That's how I'll find it. He left at dawn, guided only by the vague landmarks written in the margins of the cursed book. Past the river where the crows gather, beyond the stones that bleed. After hours of travel through black woods and cold streams, he came upon a glade where silence reigned. No birds, no insects, only wind. And there, past the crooked birches, lay Wormhold, or what was left of it, ruins. Huts collapsed in on themselves, timbers blackened. The well in the center had been scorched, stones fused like glass. Charred bones littered the streets. Elias stepped carefully, holding up his crucifix. Then he saw them. Figures, shadow-thin, translucent, standing inside the houses. They did not move, but their eyes followed him. Elias approached the largest ruin, likely the chapel. The door had been torn off. Inside, the altar was melted. Charcoal wings spread across the walls, symbols of the fallen. He opened the book again. The pages turned themselves. They stopped on a sigil, a spiral inside a triangle, bound by thorns. Underneath, written in Latin, "Speak the name and the gate opens, speak the truth and the gate feeds." He didn't understand it fully, but something shifted in the floorboards beneath him. Then came the weeping, a single child's sob echoing from below. He descended through the ruined pulpit into a collapsed cellar. The air was tight, rotten. He passed bones chained to stone, mouths still open in screams. The weeping grew louder until he saw her. A girl, no older than 7, pale as wax, standing in a circle drawn in ash. Her eyes were completely black. "Help me," she whispered. Elias raised his crucifix. "Who are you?" She blinked slowly. "I am what's left of her." "Her?" "Linka, the girl you prayed for." Elias stepped back. "That's not possible." "But it is," she said. "When the soul is split, part remains, part becomes bait." "Bait for what?" Then she smiled, and her smile was full of teeth. Father Elias took a slow step back. The girl's smile widened, inhuman, far too wide for her tiny face. Her teeth glistened like splinters of bone. "I cast you out," Elias said, lifting the crucifix. "In the name of Christ." But the girl laughed, not like a child, but like something wearing a child. "Name him all you like," she hissed. "He does not hear in Wormhold. This ground belongs to older mouths." The ash circle flared. Flames erupted, not fire, but dark, cold blue light that seemed to draw warmth from the air. Elias's breath turned to frost. The girl floated, her eyes black wells of hunger. Her voice changed, now two-toned. One still the girl, the other a deeper, older thing. She screamed when they took her. "You prayed, but too late. You failed her, priest." "No," Elias whispered. "I didn't know, but I did," it answered. With a cry, Elias hurled the holy water flask from his belt. It shattered on the circle, and a sizzle of light burned across the chamber. The girl shrieked, her form convulsing. The ash circle cracked. She dropped to the ground, limbs spasming, smoke pouring from her mouth. Then the floor collapsed. Elias tumbled through darkness. He hit stone hard. The wind knocked out of him. He rolled and coughed, his crucifix clanging beside him. Darkness swallowed everything. He fumbled for a candle, struck flint. The glow revealed a catacomb. This was not built by men. Bones formed the walls. Skulls stared from their sockets. The ground pulsed beneath his feet, breathing somehow, and a head carved in the stone was the same spiral triangle sigil. He moved toward it, compelled. As he approached, he heard voices, dozens of them chanting in reverse Latin. Whispers brushed his ears. "Feed the gate! Feed the gate!" At the center of the chamber was a pit, rimmed with jawbones. Something stirred within. Wet, massive, unseen. Elias backed away. But behind him a voice said, "Why leave so soon?" He spun around. It was the girl. No, what had worn her skin. Her form now twisted, longer, sharper, limbs like branches. Her eyes were hollow tunnels. She hovered inches from the ground, her feet never touching it. "You were meant to see this," she said. "Why?" Elias whispered. "'Cause he sent you, and we needed a door." Then she screamed, not a cry of pain, but invocation. The pit behind him opened. Tentacles emerged, shadowy, wet, covered in runes that bled. Elias held up his crucifix. In the name of the Father, the creature froze. Only for a moment. Then it recoiled, shrieking. Light poured from Elias's crucifix, and the walls shook. Bones cracked. The girl creature wailed. Elias ran, past the spiral, through collapsing tunnels, chased by the echo of inhuman moans. At last he reached the surface. Dawn had come. The village was gone. Only ash remained. Father Elias stood in the center of the wasteland that had once been Wormhold. Ash coated his cassock, his hair, even his skin. But worse, was the silence. It pressed on his ears like the absence of breath. There was no trace of the girl creature, no trace of the catacombs. The earth had swallowed all of it. He knelt and scooped up a handful of ash. It was warm, still warm. He whispered a prayer, but the words felt hollow, like speaking into the mouth of a cave. Something had followed him out. Elias returned to St. Andres by nightfall. The villagers stared. They smelled the ash before he arrived. No one greeted him. Even Marek stood in silence, staring at the dark sky above the chapel. "You've seen it?" Marek finally said. Elias nodded. "You brought something back?" "I didn't mean to. No one ever means to." Elias stepped inside the chapel. The air was different, thicker, as if the building had aged 100 years in his absence. He placed the cursed book on the altar, wrapped tightly in cloth, and knelt before it. But the crucifix on the wall had cracked, clean down the middle. He did not sleep that night. In his room, Elias lit 3 candles and placed them in a triangle around his bed. He read from Psalms, but his voice trembled. Shadows moved differently now. They watched, and just before dawn he heard it, scraping, from the roof above. He climbed to the attic, crucifix in hand, breath shallow. There, in the dust and beams of moonlight, he saw it. Ashy footprints. They began at the window, but they led inward. He followed them, one step at a time, until they vanished at the foot of his bed. And there, burned into the floorboards, was a single word in Latin, cenaculum, the upper room, the place of the Last Supper. Elias collapsed to his knees. Something was inside the church. The next day, a girl from the village was found dead, eyes missing, mouth sewn shut. No blood, no tracks. Elias stood beside Marek as the villagers whispered. "Was it Veltinia?" Marek asked. "No," Elias said. "Something older, something that wore her name." He turned to the chapel. The book opened a gate. And now, Elias tightened his grip on the crucifix. "Now it wants me to keep opening them." The funeral was quiet. The villagers didn't sing hymns. They didn't speak. They just dug the grave, lowered the girl's tiny body, and covered her in earth. Elias stood in silence. Marek was the only one near him. "She's not the last," Elias said. "I know." That night, Elias searched the chapel again. He poured holy water across every window. He burned sage. He sealed every door with salt and chalk. Still, the footsteps returned at midnight, but this time they stopped outside his door. No one knocked. No one needed to. The word cenaculum had reappeared, this time scratched into the wood of his desk with claws. By morning, Elias had made his decision. He retrieved the book from the altar, now wrapped in 3 layers of cloth, and packed for travel. The book spoke of other gates, he told Marek. One of them was opened in a place called Belthorn. Marek flinched. "You shouldn't go there. Belthorn was cursed. It vanished before I was born." "Then something remains." It took 2 days to reach the ruins. Belthorn lay deep in the woods, hidden beneath mist and roots. Time had tried to erase it. Roofs caved in, roads broken, trees splitting walls apart. But the bell tower still stood, and at its peak, the iron bell swayed in the wind. But it did not ring. It had no tongue. The silence was unnatural. Even the birds kept away. Elias entered the chapel. Dust clung to every surface. Cracks split the stone walls. And in the center of the nave, carved into the floor, was another spiral triangle. Exactly like in Wormhole. Elias fell to his knees and traced the symbol. As he touched it, his ears rang. His skin tingled. The gate was still open. He heard it then. A low, distant bell, one that was not there a moment ago, but it didn't come from the tower. It came from beneath. Elias found the trapdoor behind the altar. It was sealed with wax and rope, marked with crosses scorched black. He cut them away. The wood screamed. He descended into the dark. The catacombs of Belthorn were older than the church itself. Bones formed the walls, but unlike Wormhole, these had been arranged in ritual patterns, shapes meant to hold something in. Elias followed the markings. Every corridor led down deeper until he found it, a room of stone. At the center, a bell, but not iron. It was made of bone. Its surface writhed. Flesh had grown over it in places. Eyes blinked where runes had once been etched. Elias lifted the crucifix. Immediately the bell began to hum. Then, a voice deep and foreign. "You ring us when you enter. You ring us when you leave." "What are you?" Elias asked. "We are what was silenced. The first song, the sound before light." Elias stepped closer. Inside the hollow bell he saw movement. A hand reached out, pale, fingerless, twitching. Then another. Then a face stretched too long with no eyes or mouth. The thing inside was trying to be born. Elias dropped holy water on the bell. It screamed. The walls shook. Flesh peeled from the bell's surface. Smoke filled the chamber. Elias fled. Behind him the bell rang. Its first sound in 100 years. And it wasn't done. Elias did not sleep. The sound of the bone bell rang in his ears, even as he left Belthorn behind. It had no tongue, yet it spoke. It had no mouth, yet it screamed. And somewhere deep in the echoes, Elias could still hear that thing trying to be born. He clutched the crucifix tighter. When he arrived in St. Andres, the villagers wouldn't come near. They said he smelled like the grave. They were right. Even Merrick recoiled. "You were down there," Merrick whispered. "You looked into the pit." Elias nodded, his eyes sunken. "I heard its name," Elias said. "Not a word, not a language, just a sound that didn't belong in this world." "What did it want?" "To be remembered." That night the crows returned. They perched along the chapel's roof and steeple, silent and unmoving. Hundreds of them. When Elias stepped outside, they turned to watch him, all at once. Their eyes were pale white, lifeless, possessed. Inside the chapel, something had changed. The candles no longer burned right. Their flames flickered toward the walls, not up. The baptismal font bubbled, though the water was still. The cross above the altar had cracked completely in two. Elias knelt to pray, but the voice from the bell followed him into his mind. "You remember me, so now I am." He opened the book again. One of the pages had turned black. No ink, just darkness, and it was spreading. 3 days later, the bells of St. Andres rang at midnight. No one had touched them. Everyone awoke to the sound. When Elias reached the bell tower, he found the rope swinging on its own. The bells rang once, then stopped, and from the graveyard, someone screamed. They found Father Tomas, the old priest, buried 10 years ago, standing in his own grave, eyes open, mouth stitched shut. His tongue had been removed, but he was still alive. Elias stared, breath frozen in his lungs. "He's not Tomas anymore," Merrick said behind him. "That's what the villagers say." "They're right," Elias whispered. "It's something else, a vessel." "For what?" "For whatever was born inside the bone bell." Elias placed a silver crucifix on the creature's forehead. Smoke rose. It grinned through the stitches. Then it spoke, not with its mouth, but from within Elias's head. "You opened the first door. You saw the second. The third will bleed." That night, Elias dug through every old record the chapel kept. He found a page written in Latin, dated 3 centuries ago. It spoke of 3 gates: the gate of sound, the gate of sight, and the gate of flesh. He had already opened 2. The last one was hidden in a place called Luthen Hollow. And according to the record, no one who entered Luthen Hollow ever returned. Elias stared into the candlelight. Then he whispered, "Lord, am I still your servant?" But no answer came, only silence. And in that silence, the bell rang once more. Elias rode alone. The path to Luthen Hollow was not marked on any modern map. The last reference to the village appeared in a church ledger from 1712, which recorded a failed exorcism, sealed with prayer and blood. Beyond that, nothing. Even the trees grew wrong in this part of the world. Too many branches, too few leaves, bark like scabbed flesh. The further Elias went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, only breathing. But it was not his. After a day and a half on horseback, Elias reached a bridge made of bones, real ones. Hundreds of ribs and femurs lashed together with sinew, forming an arch over a black stream. The horse refused to cross, so Elias continued on foot. Every step over the bridge echoed with a hollow snap. At the far end, an iron plaque had been nailed into a tree. Luthen Hollow, the place that should not be. Beyond it, the world changed. The sky darkened, though it was still day. Fog rose from the ground like steam. Shapes moved behind the mist, figures that had no feet. But Elias pressed on. His crucifix grew cold in his hand. Then he saw the village, or what was left of it. Luthen Hollow had no roofs. The houses stood half sunk into the earth, their windows bricked over, doors gone. A black ichor wept from the walls. At the center of the village stood a well. It pulsed, as if something below was breathing. Elias stepped forward. The closer he came, the stronger the smell. Rot, rust, and blood. He peered down. There was no water, just a spiral staircase descending into the dark, exactly like the catacombs beneath Wormhold and Belthorn. Another gate. And beside the well, a stone altar. Carved into its surface were the same symbols as the cursed book. But the markings weren't ancient. They were fresh, still bleeding. Suddenly, Elias heard a sound behind him, a wet, dragging sound. He turned. A figure stood at the edge of the village. It wore a priest's robes, but its face was made of scar tissue and ash. Its eyes were sewn shut. Its mouth was open, but full of teeth that didn't belong to any man. It held a censer, one that smoked not with incense, but with black blood. It opened its mouth wider, and in a voice that sounded like many voices stacked on top of each other, it said, "The flesh remembers." Then it charged. Elias flung holy water at the thing. It hissed and buckled, flesh peeling away in ribbons of steam. But it didn't fall. He drew his crucifix, shouting verses of binding. Still the thing advanced. He had no choice. Elias pulled the book from his satchel, the cursed tome wrapped in cloth, and opened it to the black page. It had grown. The blackness now spilled across 3 pages, and within that void he saw movement. Hands, faces, eyes. Whispers filled the air. The creature stopped. It screamed, not from pain but from memory. Then it collapsed, twitching, and bled out onto the altar. Elias stood over it, heart pounding. But the whispers didn't stop. From the well came a second voice. "You carry the 3rd gate now. Flesh will follow, and what was bound will wake." Elias fell to his knees. He no longer felt like a priest, just a man standing at the edge of the abyss, while something inside the well smiled up at him. The steps were slick with blood that wasn't fresh. It had dried, then oozed again, as if the walls of the well wept for the souls lost below. Elias descended slowly, torch in one hand, crucifix in the other. Every step downwards felt like a year of his life stolen. The stone around him pulsed, not with life, but with hunger. He stopped counting steps after the first 100. Somewhere above, the sky no longer existed. Below, the 3rd gate waited. The stairs ended in a cavern lined with skins, human, stretched across the walls like parchment, stitched together with black thread. Some still had faces, eyes closed, mouths sewn shut, and they were breathing. Elias whispered a psalm to steady his spirit. His voice echoed back, with not as sound, but as laughter. In the center of the chamber was an altar made of bone and rusted iron, shaped like a spine coiled into a throne, and seated atop it was himself, or rather a version of him, a priest robed in darker vestments, eyes black as coal, skin tight against bone. No crucifix, only a crown of fingers worn like a halo. It smiled. Elias couldn't speak. The doppelganger did. "You prayed to silence, and silence answered." Its voice was like Elias's, but deeper, hollowed. "3 gates, 3 truths. You have opened them all. Now you must choose." "Choose what?" Elias finally choked out. "Who will carry the memory, and who will carry the wound?" Elias backed away. But behind him, the skins began to shift. They slid down the walls, crawling, grasping, trying to wear him like a cloak. He held up the crucifix, but the false Elias laughed again. The cross burns only if the soul behind it is whole. Elias screamed a prayer, but the ground split, the altar shattered, and from below a creature rose. It had no face, only a stretched mask of flesh with dozens of empty eye sockets, weeping blood. Its voice came from inside Elias's bones. "You were never hunting us, we were calling you." Then it lunged. Elias was swallowed by darkness and teeth and memory. He saw everything. The failed exorcisms, the priests who had vanished before him. The true purpose of the cursed book, not to banish the demons, but to prepare their vessel. He was the vessel. He always had been. He didn't scream, because now he understood. The gates didn't open outward. They opened inward. When Elias awoke, he lay at the bottom of the well, alive, but not whole. The crucifix still burned in his palm, but faintly. He climbed out of the pit with hands that shook. The village was gone. No well, no altar, no bones, only open field. Marek found him 2 days later wandering barefoot, eyes dull, mouth whispering scripture that didn't exist. Elias looked up at him and said, "I've seen God's shadow, and it's hungry." They brought Elias back to Varnum Abbey. The brothers tried to tend to him, but he wouldn't eat, he wouldn't sleep, and he would not allow anyone to touch the black mark now spreading across his chest, a jagged spiral like a wound carved by whispers. It pulsed. At night, the mark glowed faintly, and Elias whispered in his sleep, not in Latin, not in any human tongue. Marek watched from the doorway. He had seen Elias walk through fire and blood, had watched him call down angels and curse demons. But now, Elias wasn't the same. Something moved behind his eyes, like smoke trapped in a bottle, waiting for glass to crack. Brother Thomas approached Marek. He brought something back with him. Marek nodded. Or he left something behind. Neither of them were wrong. That evening, Elias finally rose. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed, but his voice calm. "It's not over," he said. "The fourth gate has opened." "But we only found 3, Marek replied. Elias touched his chest. "The fourth is within." He unwrapped the cursed book, placed it on the altar, and turned to a page that hadn't existed before. It was blank. At first, then, writing began to form. Black ink bled from the paper itself, curling into a single phrase. "The flesh remembers, but the bones obey." Below it, a list of names appeared. None of them were familiar, except one, Brother Thomas. They turned to him. Thomas backed away, trembling. "I swear I've done nothing." But Elias's eyes had changed. No longer warm, no longer afraid, only resigned. "You were marked years ago, before you ever wore the cloth." Marek moved to protect Thomas, but Elias raised his hand. "Look," he said, and Thomas screamed. His skin began to move. Not burn, not tear, move, like something beneath it was trying to get out. His hands clawed at his chest as symbols appeared beneath his skin, burned from the inside out. Thomas fell, gasping as a voice unlike his own rasped from his throat. "The bones remember where they were buried." Then he went still, eyes open, dead. Elias turned to Marek. "This is what the fourth gate does. It reveals the hidden flesh, the sleepers buried inside men." Marek shook. We've been living next to them all this time?" Elias nodded. "Some wear skin as masks. Others don't even know they're wearing it." He opened the book again. Another name appeared. Elias Brandt. His own? He smiled bitterly. "I am not the hunter anymore. I am the gate." He closed the book. It screamed when it shut, and behind the walls of the abbey something began to knock. The knocking didn't stop. It came from inside the walls of Varnum Abbey, rhythmic, slow, like something with too many joints tapping its way along the stone. The brothers tried to pray, but the prayers echoed hollow, bouncing back warped, like the voices weren't reaching heaven. Elias stood by the altar, eyes closed, listening. Marek was shaking. "We have to get out of here." Elias opened his eyes. There is no out, only through. Another knock, closer now. The crucifix on the wall tilted by itself, metal bending as if in pain. Then silence. For 1 second. Then a The stone cracked. A section of the abbey wall burst open, but there was no wind, no debris, just flesh. It slithered through the crack like a limbless thing, pale and glistening, dragging with it a stench of grave rot and old milk. Brother Paul screamed first. The thing didn't roar, it whispered. And when it did, Brother Paul's ears bled and he fell, choking on his own tongue. Elias stepped forward. He raised his crucifix, but the air shimmered and the holy symbol melted in his hand, warping into the shape of a key. He stared at it. It's not about banishment anymore, he said. It's about unlocking. The thing from the wall reared up. Now it had eyes, hundreds, all closed. Then one by one they opened. Every eye had a different face reflected inside it, screaming, crying, some still praying. Marek turned to Elias. What is it? Elias looked pale. It's the sleeper, the hunger given shape, the echo of every sin ever left unconfessed. Then it spoke from inside their chests. We are not demons. We are what you bury, and we are so very hungry. Marek grabbed a torch and flung it. The fire licked the thing's surface, and it screamed, but not in pain, in ecstasy. Its flesh split open, and from within emerged hands, children's hands, women's, old men's, all reaching. They didn't attack. They begged. They clawed the air as if drowning in dry stone. Elias dropped to his knees. I recognize them, he whispered. These are the ones I couldn't save. The flesh surged forward, and for a moment it wore Tomas's face, torn, stitched, and weeping. Elias, let us in. He didn't move. Marek pulled him away just in time. They ran, but the flesh came after them. Not fast, but inevitable. Down the stairs, through the chapel, past the old crypts. The flesh followed, dragging echoes behind it. Fragments of prayers, regrets, and unfinished confessions. Finally, Elias and Marek reached the sealed chamber beneath the abbey, where the cursed book was first found, where the first priest went mad. Elias opened the rusted door. Inside's nothing, but the silence felt awake. This is where it began, Elias said. Marek. And can it end here? Elias, only if I make the last confession. He stepped into the chamber alone, closed the door behind him. The wall began to throb. Marek stood outside, praying. For Elias, for the abbey, for whatever still lingered in the dark. Then he heard it. A voice, not Elias's, not his own. You are praying to a God that has already left. And the walls began to bleed. Inside the sealed chamber, Elias knelt before the altar of stone. It was bare, no cross, no candle, only the cold silence and the whispering, not aloud, but inside his bones. The voices had names. He remembered them. Children he'd failed in Romania, the mother who begged him in Carpathia, the monk who hanged himself after Elias refused to hear his confession. You cannot silence what you never listened to, they hissed. Elias tried to pray, but the words rotted in his mouth, turning to ash before they reached the air. Then he heard another voice, deeper, older, closer. This is not a place of judgment, it said. It is a place of collection. The wall behind the altar cracked. A wooden confessional booth rose from the ground, grown from the stone like fungus. It was warped, blackened, and breathing. Elias stood, trembling. He knew what this was. A mirror, he whispered, for the soul. He stepped inside and sat. Outside, Marek was pacing. The blood from the walls had stopped flowing, but now the abbey itself was groaning. Stone shifted, wood warped. The crucifix in the nave turned upside down without being touched. The brothers gathered, terrified, but Marek held them back. This is Elias's burden. We must not interfere. Then they heard a sound, a slow creaking, like a door opening on rotten hinges. From below, inside the confessional, Elias sat. The screen before him was dark. Then a shape formed on the other side. Not a man, not a demon, but a silhouette of Elias himself. And it spoke. Confess. Elias clenched his hands. I've sinned. No, I've failed. No, I don't believe anymore. Silence. Then, closer. The wooden screen vanished. No barrier now, only Elias. And Elias. One in flesh, one in shadow. The shadow smiled. You hunted demons, but never the one that whispered inside you. Elias, I am not like them. Shadow. But you are. You just wear your damnation better. Outside the air grew thick. The abbey bells rang by themselves. 1, 2, 3, and then shattered. Inside, Elias wept. He confessed everything. Every child left behind. Every order followed blindly. Every demon spared because of fear. Every moment of silence when he should have screamed. The shadow leaned forward. You were never hunting demons, Elias. You were calling them. Then it reached across the void and touched Elias's chest. Right over the mark, Elias screamed. Outside, the abbey split. Not just cracked, it broke open like a rib cage, light and shadow spilling from the wound. Marek fell to his knees as something rose from below. Not flesh, not spirit. Memory? The air shimmered, and a voice, Elias's voice, whispered from every stone. He is not the gate. He is what waits behind it. The ruins of the abbey smoked. Stones still shifted as if uneasy in their final rest. The other monks stood among the wreckage, silent, afraid to speak, afraid to move. The sky had not returned to normal. It swirled in bruised clouds, a wound above the world. Only Marek dared descend. Torch in hand, he followed the cracked floor where the confessional had once stood. Now it was gone, pulled downward, dragged into something beneath the abbey, a tunnel, not carved by tools, gnawed by time, and something worse. He descended. Below, Elias lay in the dark, chest rising, falling, alive, but no longer alone. The mark on his chest glowed dimly now, no longer a brand, but an eye, closed, sleeping, but pulsing faintly. And beside him, something moved, a creature, tall but thin, bones sharp and wrong beneath translucent skin, a face hidden beneath a veil of gauze and shadow. Its hands were human, too human, shaking as if afraid. Elias stirred. It spoke. You are open now. Elias gasped. What are you? Memory. Regret. Gatekeeper. The creature leaned down, and where its shadow touched the floor, images formed. Faces, places, screams, as though it remembered for him. You hunted demons without knowing their names. You burned devils that did not know they were damned. You never asked why they were born. Elias coughed blood. His voice trembled. I was following God. The creature tilted its head. Then why did God never follow you? Silence. Then footsteps. Marek appeared in the shadows, torchlight flickering. Elias. The creature vanished into mist. Elias sat up, blood on his robes, eyes hollow. I saw it, Marek, the one behind the veil. Marek stepped closer. Are you possessed? Elias shook his head. I am seen. That night, they did not sleep. They rebuilt a fire near the ruins. And Elias finally spoke. There's something deeper under this land. Not just sin, not just death. A name was buried here, Marek. A name that demons cannot say. A name even angels avoid. Marek frowned. You mean? Elias nodded. An original, one of the old ones. Before God's breath, before hell's rebellion. Marek felt his heart slow. Why is it waking now? Elias looked up at the sky, still swirling, still bruised. Because I've come too close. 2 days later, they reached Lunadorf, a remote village nestled between dead hills and a forest where the trees grew without sound. The silence here was wrong, not peaceful, but waiting. Elias and Marek passed through the narrow gate where crucifixes had been nailed upside down. Each home was sealed shut with ropes of salt and iron, but no smoke rose from chimneys. No dogs barked, no birds sang. It was a place where even wind refused to stay. This is where the next summoning happened, Elias muttered. Marek scanned the empty windows. Are they all dead? Elias shook his head. Worse. They've been emptied. At the village square, they found the well. It was old, the stones around it blackened by soot and claw marks. The bucket lay overturned, dry. Carvings circled the well's mouth, not in Latin, but in some guttural, unfinished language, as if the words themselves feared being spoken. Elias knelt. Someone tried to seal it again, he said, pointing at rusted nails driven into a wooden lid. But the thing inside Watto was older than nails. Suddenly, from the church at the far end of the square, came a sound, organ music, but not sacred. This tune slithered, broken, discordant, rising like breath through a corpse's throat. They drew their weapons. If something's playing, Marek said, it means something wants us to hear it. They entered. The church interior was wrong. Pews broken and rearranged into a spiral across the floor. The altar missing. And at the organ, not a man, not quite a corpse, sat a figure in red robes, face covered in a veil made from rosary beads fused together with blood. It didn't stop playing. It spoke without turning. You like my choir? I made it from echoes in the last breath of a martyr. Elias stepped forward. What are you? The figure rose slowly. Rosaries clinked as it moved. I am a herald, a mouth, a page torn from Scripture. You have touched the veil, priest. Now the veil looks back. It lifted its veil. Beneath, only empty sockets, dripping oil-black tears. Marek shot his crossbow. The figure dissolved, not into blood, but into locusts. Thousands, screaming, burning, twisting into shapes of human mouths, each whispering a piece of a forgotten prayer. The church buckled. The spiral on the floor glowed red. Elias shouted, Marek, get out! But the door was gone. Only fire now. Only screams. And one final whisper, loud enough to echo through stone. You opened the gate. Elias awoke to sunlight. Warm. Clean. Birds chirped. He blinked. He was in a bed. A small wooden room. A fire crackled in the hearth. Outside the window, children laughed, chasing chickens through sunlit fields. He sat up sharply. No, not real. Couldn't be. But his wounds were gone. The pain in his ribs, the cracked skin around the brand, all healed. His cassock hung freshly pressed on a wooden hook. Footsteps. A woman entered, smiling, pale eyes. You slept through the storm, Father, but all is well now. Lundorf is safe. She set down a tray of food, bread, cheese, warm milk. The mayor would like to speak with you. Elias rose slowly, eyes scanning the room. Where is Marek? The woman paused. He's with the children, playing. He said you'd understand. Elias walked outside. Everything was too perfect, too still. People smiled too long. Shadows didn't shift with the sun. The chickens had no eyes. He walked to the town square. It was whole again. No blackened well. No upside-down crucifixes. At the center stood the mayor, wearing a clean suit, his face smeared with ash. Father Elias, he greeted, tipping his hat. We're glad you're awake. This is your reward. Reward? Elias asked. For what? For freeing us. The mayor's smile widened unnaturally. You cast out the locust thing. The village is clean again. Elias stepped closer. And what did I cast it into? The mayor's mouth opened, too wide. A second voice spoke from his throat. Into yourself. The sun cracked. Like glass? The sky split open and darkness poured down, oily and shrieking. People in the square froze, then peeled, skin falling off like masks. Hollow skulls grinned beneath, mouthing the same word. Father, Father, you brought it with you. Elias collapsed, clutching his chest. The eyebrand pulsed violently. Blood seeped through his robes. Reality twisted. The village spun. And when it stopped, he was back in the ruined church, alone. Ashes in his mouth, soot in his hair, no sunlight, no laughter. Just the whisper of the wind asking, why do you keep looking behind the veil? They buried the dead at dawn. At least, the pieces they could find. Marek hadn't spoken since the collapse of the church. His hands shook. His eyes stayed distant, like they were still staring into the spiral. Elias didn't press him. Some wounds fester when forced open. They left Lundorf behind by midday, traveling southwest through fog-drenched woods toward a valley known as Dread Hollow, a place whispered of in old orders, sealed in church archives too black for public sight. As they walked, the trees thinned, mist thickened, and then the bells began, faint, rusty, ringing from beneath the earth. "Do you hear that?" Elias asked. Marek only nodded. They crested the final hill. Below, a forgotten village, sunken into the hollow like a corpse pressed into a grave. Houses leaned, roofs collapsed, but the church bell tower still stood crooked, chiming once every few minutes, though no wind moved. The sound made Elias's teeth ache. "This place shouldn't exist anymore," he said. "Yet it rings," Marek whispered, "like it's remembering itself." Inside the village, silence reigned. Elias entered the church first. Marek waited outside, sharpening his blades, though his hands trembled with each pull. The air inside the church smelled of dried blood and forgotten confessions. Candles had long burned out, but fresh wax trailed along the altar, and carved into the stone were words, "Sicut in vita, sic in morte," as in life, so in death. Elias touched the inscription. His hand burned, suddenly all around him, whispering. Behind the walls, beneath the floorboards, a low, aching chant, not in Latin, but some mimicry of it, like a ghost trying to remember the words to Mass. Then the bell rang again, but this time from inside the church. Elias turned. At the far end of the nave stood a figure, white robe, bloodstained, face wrapped in bandages. It carried a censer, one that dripped black smoke and maggots instead of incense, and from under the bandages came a hoarse, rasping prayer. "Bless me, Father, for I am still dying." Elias raised his cross. The figure shrieked, and the ground cracked. From the pews, from the crypts below, hands began to rise, clawed, burned, skinless. 100 former parishioners, caught between absolution and rot, crawled toward him, whispering sermons they could not finish. Outside, Marek heard the screams. He ran in, crossbow ready, but the moment he crossed the church threshold, he stopped. His eyes glowed faintly red. Elias saw it. "Marek?" he called, but Marek didn't answer. He turned slowly toward Elias. Then he smiled, and it was not Marek's smile. Marek's smile was wrong. It didn't belong to him. Too wide, too cruel. "Marek," Elias said, slowly raising the crucifix, "whatever's inside you, it doesn't belong." The possessed hunter tilted his head. "But I do belong, Father. I've always belonged, ever since the first sin you buried." The voice was distorted. 2 tones overlapped. Marek's and something older. Older than the village, older than Elias himself. Behind Marek, the risen dead began to chant again, louder now, echoing from the broken pews and cracked walls. "In morte veritas," in death, the truth. Elias took a step back. His fingers tightened on the crucifix, his other hand reaching for the holy water flask. "You're not him, let him go." The demon inside Marek laughed. "Why? So he can keep crying in silence? You think he doesn't remember what happened to his sister?" Elias froze. "Yes, the one who bled dry in the monastery crypt. You remember her too, don't you, Father?" "Enough!" Elias shouted, casting the holy water in a wide arc. The drops sizzled midair, burning Marek's skin, or whatever wore his skin. Smoke hissed from his eyes. Marek stumbled backward, clutching his face. "He's still in there," Elias called. "I know it." The chanting grew deafening. The dead rose higher, bodies tangled in robes and worms. One reached out and grabbed Elias's arm, whispering, "Free us." Elias turned and smashed its skull with his crucifix, then ran toward Marek, not to harm, but to exorcise. "I speak the name of God," he cried, "and by the blood of the Lamb I command thee, come out." Marek dropped to his knees, screaming. His body arched unnaturally, veins bulging black across his skin. "You can't save him," the demon hissed. "He let me in." Elias pressed the crucifix to Marek's forehead. "Then I'll tear you out myself." There was a sound like breaking glass inside a coffin. And then a silence. Marek lay still. Smoke rose from his mouth. Elias leaned over, hand trembling. Then Marek's eyes opened. Clear? Tears slipped from the corners. She called to me, he whispered. My sister, her voice was sweet. I thought it was her. Elias helped him sit up. They use pain to enter. Regret is their doorway. Are they gone? Marek asked. But Elias said nothing, because all around them the chanting continued, and the church floor began to tremble. Something deeper had been woken, something that wore sin like a second skin. Elias helped Marek to his feet. We need to go now. But as they turned toward the exit, the bell rang again, once, twice, then 13 times, and with each ring, a shape stepped forth from the shadows. Tall, veiled, rotted, and each one wore a mask carved from bone. 13 figures, 13 masks. Each one stepped forward in unison, ritualistic, as if part of a forgotten liturgy. Their masks were carved from human bone, jawbones, eye sockets, skull fragments. Their robes were stitched from old vestments and burial shrouds, dripping with the weight of grave soil. Marek clutched Elias's arm. They're watching us. No, Elias said, they're judging us. The veiled figures spread in a half circle surrounding them in the church nave. The bell rang once more, and the figure at the center, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Its mask was made from a complete human face, dried and stretched. When it spoke, it used Elias's own voice. You buried them, Father, but they remember. Elias froze. The others began to chant, soft at first, then rising like the tide. Absolve or burn, absolve or burn. Marek backed up. Now, this is a trial, he whispered. They're priests, or they were. Elias understood. This was a tribunal of souls that had once worn the cloth, now condemned by the very sins they tried to absolve in others. Well, what do you want? Elias asked. The 13th figure raised a blackened Bible, its pages soaked in wax and rot. Confession. The others echoed, confess. The church door slammed shut. The walls trembled, and from the floor rose a stone altar, ancient and cracked with rusted chains on each side. You will confess what you've buried, the 13th figure said. Elias's throat tightened. There's nothing left to confess. The figure pointed toward Marek. Then he will pay? Chains snapped toward Marek, serpentine, alive. Elias leapt in front of him, arms spread. Take me. You are already taken, the figures replied. Suddenly, Elias felt the sting of heat in his chest. He looked down. Blood. One of the masked ones had stabbed him, a ritual dagger, obsidian and curved. Elias fell to his knees. Everything blurred. The altar pulsed red. Marek screamed. And then the floor split. Not open, but downward, as if the church itself was being pulled into some inverted world beneath consecrated ground. The last thing Elias saw was the 13th mask leaning close. It whispered, in the 13th hour, even faith has a price. Darkness. Elias drifted, suspended in a void without time. No breath, no heartbeat, only memory. Then a throb. Pain, old and intimate, returned like a friend long forgotten. He opened his eyes. The world above was gone. Instead, he stood beneath the altar, or what remained of it, in a realm of endless catacombs, where bones lined the walls like mortar, and scripture carved itself into the stone in bleeding Latin. Ex fide per crucem ad tenebras. From faith through the cross into darkness, a twisted mockery of the holy word. Elias stepped forward, his robes torn and scorched. His crucifix was still in his hand, now blackened and hot to the touch. The air here was thick with ash, but not dead. It breathed as though the ground itself was alive. From behind him came the sound of chains dragging. Elias turned. Marek, still alive, bloodied and bound, dragged by unseen hands through the dust. His eyes opened as Elias approached. Is this hell? No, Elias said softly, not yet. The path before them was a descent. Steps spiraled downward into darker layers of this spiritual underworld, like the rings of Dante's Inferno, but holier somehow, like an inverted cathedral. At each level, Elias could hear voices, whispers of souls trapped between salvation and damnation. A child cried. A nun screamed. A priest laughed as madly. Marek whimpered. Why are we here? Elias didn't answer. He couldn't, because part of him knew this place was not punishment. Not yet. It was a mirror, a place where faith was stripped of pretense and truth walked without skin. At the lowest level of the stairs, they reached a black door. No handle, no lock, only symbols etched in flame. 3 nails, a bleeding eye, a lamb turned to bone. Elias reached out. The door burned at his touch, but it opened. Inside was a chapel, mocked and decayed, an altar of skulls. And behind it, sitting on a throne of withered saints, was a figure draped in robes of red smoke and shadow. Its voice was like 1,000 sermons, whispered all at once. Father Elias, shepherd of the broken, welcome to the undersanctum. Elias stepped forward, Marek limped behind him. You have been judged, but judgment is not the end. The figure pointed to the altar. You must complete the rite. What rite? The one you denied long ago, the exorcism of yourself. The doors slammed shut behind them, and above the bell, the real bell, rang again. Only this time it rang backwards. The chapel pulsed with a sickly red glow. Elias stepped toward the altar of skulls, every bone humming with a low, sorrowful resonance, like prayers uttered in reverse. Marek, barely conscious, watched from the ground. His lips moved, whispering a prayer, one Elias had taught him long ago. But here even prayers felt wrong. The shadowy figure on the throne extended its arm. You must begin, it said, or be unmade. Elias's hands trembled. He remembered the rite of exorcism, every word, every step. He had performed it 12 times before, but never like this. In the name of the Father, Elias began, voice weak, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The shadows in the chapel stirred. Something growled from the walls. Amen, came the echo, but not from Elias. It was spoken by another voice, from within him, a voice he had heard before in the deepest moments of despair. The voice that had whispered when he buried the child in the snow 10 years ago. The voice that said, "You save no one." Elias gripped the crucifix tighter. "Begone, unclean spirit, depart from this servant of God." The red glow flared. A wind howled through the chapel, and Elias screamed, not in rage, but in grief, because from his own mouth came laughter, dark, mirthless, inhuman. "You call me demon," the voice said through Elias's lips, "but you built me." The walls cracked. The altar bled. Marek crawled forward. "Elias, fight it." Elias collapsed, spasming, eyes white with flame. He was inside himself now, in a place of memory and nightmare. He stood again in the snowy graveyard, the tiny coffin open. The child's face stared back at him, pale, frozen, and smiling. "You said he was saved," the child whispered. "I believed it," Elias said, voice shaking. "But you lied. To me? To God?" From behind the grave rose dozens more coffins, all the ones Elias had buried, all the ones he had failed to save. They opened, one by one. Each face had his eyes. "You wear the cloth," they said, "but you never believed." Elias fell to his knees in the snow. "I do believe, I do." "Then prove it," came a voice, not of accusation, but of mercy. Elias looked up and saw his mentor, Father Anselm, standing in the snow, untouched by rot. "The demon is not what possesses you," Anselm said softly. "It is what you refuse to forgive." The snow turned to light. Elias reached for it, and in the chapel, his body levitated, the black smoke erupting from his chest in streams of fire. The shadow on the throne recoiled. Marek watched as Elias stood again, glowing with a light not of this world. Elias spoke, not in Latin, not in English, but in the tongue of heaven. The demon screamed, and the skulls on the altar cracked. The throne shattered. The chapel collapsed into white fire, and Elias was whole again. Silence, then breath. Elias gasped, a ragged, burning inhale as if he had not breathed in 1,000 years. His body lay on cold stone, but it was no longer the under sanctum, no longer the chapel of skulls and shadows. He blinked. Snow. A soft flurry drifted down from the sky above. The forest clearing, the ruined village, the old chapel, now collapsed, burned to blackened stones and ash. Marek knelt beside him, bloody but alive. "You came back," he whispered. Elias sat up slowly. Every bone screamed. How long was I gone?" Marek didn't answer. He only looked at the sky. The stars overhead were unfamiliar, wrong somehow, like they had been rearranged. "I don't think time passed the same way," Marek murmured. Elias reached for his crucifix. It was whole again. Clean, warm, not just a symbol anymore. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "We left something behind," Elias said. "No," Marek corrected. "Something followed us." From the trees came a distant sound, a low humming, like a choir of bees and whispers. It grew louder, closer. Marek stood, drawing a dagger. Elias, despite the pain, rose beside him. Through the tree line came a shape, humanoid, tall, cloaked in tattered white robes that dragged along the snow. Its face was covered in a mask of thorns. Elias recognized it instantly. "That was the statue," he said, pointing to the mask. "From the altar, the one behind the flame." But statues didn't move, didn't breathe. And this thing did. It stopped 12 feet away and raised one long skeletal hand. A voice, not spoken but injected directly into their minds, said, "You broke the threshold." Elias stepped forward. "Who are you?" "The Watcher Between," it answered. "You were never meant to leave that place whole." Marek growled. "You want to drag us back?" "No," the creature replied. "Now that the gate is open, others will come through." Elias felt a chill deeper than coldly, a spiritual shiver. Behind the creature, the trees began to bend, pulled inward. Reality itself seemed to twist, like something massive was trying to crawl through the forest into this world. Elias understood. The rite had not sealed the evil. It had torn the veil. "This was only a trial," he whispered, "a warning." The Watcher turned and vanished. No sound, no step, no trace, just the wind. Elias turned to Marek. "We must find the next one." "Next what?" "The next breach, the next village, the next soul that's being hunted." Marek nodded. He didn't smile. Neither did Elias, because both now knew the war had only just begun. The town of Stronheim was quiet, too quiet. It sat nestled between frozen hills, its streets cobbled and slick with frost. Smoke curled from a few chimneys, but no footsteps echoed, no voices rose. It felt abandoned, yet watched. Elias and Marek passed beneath the rusting town gate, its arch still bearing the carved Latin phrase, "Domus Fidei, Porte Lucis, House of Faith, Gate of Light." Elias whispered a short prayer. "This place has seen better days," Marek muttered, hand on his blade. The first sign of something wrong was the bell tower. It loomed above the chapel, ancient and cracked. But the bell inside was moving, not ringing, just swaying back and forth. Slowly, Elias frowned. "There's no wind." They approached the chapel doors. They were open, just slightly. Inside, darkness, heavy breathing. Elias stepped in first. The chapel interior was dust-choked and covered in cobwebs. Pews broken, icons defaced. The altar splattered with something black and flaking. "This town didn't die slowly," Elias said quietly. "It was emptied." "Where are the bodies?" Marek asked. "That's what I'm afraid to find out." The bell rang. Once, low, metallic, unnatural. Elias and Marek turned just in time to see figures moving along the pews. Women, children, men. Their eyes were open, but empty. Their mouths open, but no sound. Silent parishioners, Marek drew his blade. "Elias?" But Elias didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the priest, standing behind the altar. He wore tattered black robes, his face pale and dry like a statue of ash, but his eyes burned red. He raised a hand, not to bless, but to command, and the silent congregation turned toward Elias and Marek. "They're not dead," Elias whispered. "They're bound." "To what?" The priest behind the altar smiled and spoke in a language older than Latin. The bell tolled again. The people rushed forward, silent and fast. Marek swung his blade, slicing through a man's shoulder, but there was no blood. The man didn't fall, didn't even react. He kept walking. "They don't feel pain," Marek shouted. Elias held up his crucifix. "Domine, libera nos." The bell rang a third time, and the floor cracked beneath them. From beneath the chapel, something massive began to rise. A pulsing heart, covered in runes, bound in chains of bone. Elias realized the truth. They'd been feeding it. The town, the prayer, the silence. It was a heart of the old god, buried and forgotten, now waking. "We have to destroy it," Elias said. "How?" Elias turned to the altar and saw the black-robed priest wasn't speaking anymore. He was praying silently, with blood streaming from his eyes. He was the bell. He was the key. "The priest," Elias said. "Kill him." Elias ran toward the altar. Behind him, Marek was locked in brutal combat, swords slashing, dodging silent worshippers that moved like puppets with cut strings, jerky but relentless. "The priest?" Elias shouted. "We end this through him." The red-eyed priest knelt still, whispering prayers in that terrible ancient tongue. His hands were stretched above the heart of the old god, which now pulsed faster, louder, like a war drum. Chains of bone wrapped tighter around it, as though holding it back from awakening fully. But the chains were cracking. Blood pooled at the priest's feet, leaking from his eyes, nose, and fingertips. He was a conduit, a vessel, willingly giving himself to awaken the thing below. Elias leapt onto the altar, gripping his crucifix in one hand, dagger in the other. "By the authority of the Lord Most High," but the priest opened his eyes, and Elias was blasted back by an invisible force, flung across the chapel like a rag doll. He hit the far wall with a crack and fell hard. The crucifix skidded across the floor. The priest rose slowly, limbs trembling. He began to sing. It was not a hymn. It was a dirge, deep, guttural, vibrating the very stone walls. The heart below beat faster. The bell rang again without touch. Marek, bleeding and panting, reached Elias. "You alive?" Elias groaned. "Barely." The crucifix lay between them, humming. Suddenly Elias knew. It wasn't the priest's body that mattered. It was the song, the melody that linked him to the heart. "He's not the heart. He's the tongue," Elias gasped. "We silence the song. We sever the bond." Marek picked up the crucifix and looked to Elias. "Then let's shut him up." They moved together, Elias limping, Marek shielding him. The congregation swarmed, but they were slower now, dazed, confused, as if the link was weakening. They reached the altar. The priest turned toward them, his mouth open unnaturally wide, jaw distended like a serpent. The song crescendoed, rising like a storm. Elias clutched the crucifix and thrust it forward, pressing it to the priest's chest. "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti," the priest screamed, an unholy wail that cracked the stained glass. Black smoke poured from his mouth as he clawed at the air. The song shattered. The heart stopped beating. Then the priest collapsed, ash spilling from his robes. The bell fell silent. So did the congregation. The people dropped unconscious, breathing alive. The chapel fell still. Only the sound of Elias's ragged breath remained. Marek looked around. "Is it over?" Elias closed his eyes. "For Strauheim, yes." He looked to the cracked altar. The heart was still there, no longer pulsing but not gone. But the old gods don't die easily. The storm outside had begun to wane, and pale light filtered through the shattered, stained glass windows of Strauheim's ruined chapel. The congregation lay scattered, unconscious but alive. Marek and Elias sat in the apse, their backs against the cold stone, silent. The heart of the old god no longer pulsed, but it still throbbed faintly with a presence. Elias could feel it, like a second heartbeat in the walls. "It's not over, is it?" Marek asked. "No," Elias said. "The body is dead, but the root goes deeper." He stood and walked to the cracked altar. There was a small hollow underneath it, previously hidden by the priest's robes. Inside was a stone basin filled with dark liquid, blood, still warm, and carved beneath it an ancient sigil, scorched into the stone. Elias froze. He recognized it. His fingers traced the lines, eyes wide with memory. "What is it?" Marek asked. Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he dropped to his knees before the basin. His voice was faint. "I've seen this mark once before, when I was a child." He touched the sigil, and vision surged through him. A forgotten monastery, fire, screams, a room sealed with salt and prayers, and a woman, veiled in black, whispering his name. "You are the key to what sleeps beneath." Elias gasped, pulling his hand back as if burned. Marek stared. "What did you see?" "A monastery. One that burned. My home, my childhood. I thought it was just a fire. But now I think something woke up." Marek looked at the sigil. "You said it's the same?" "Identical." Elias stood, trembling. "This isn't just about stray demons or cursed towns. Something's rising, and we are on a path already written." Marek's face hardened. "So what's next?" Elias looked to the trap door behind the altar. Half-buried, ancient, the wood blackened. He walked toward it slowly. "We go beneath." "Of course we do," Marek muttered. They opened the door. A staircase wound into darkness, deeper than it should have gone, as if the earth had been hollowed out not by men, but by something older. With each step, the air grew colder, and Elias began to remember things he had never told anyone. The staircase spiraled for what felt like hours. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Not a normal cold, but something ancient and dry, like the inside of a forgotten tomb. The stone walls were carved with symbols. Some Elias recognized from forbidden scriptures. Others were older, symbols of the first tongue, the language of the old gods. "How deep are we?" Marek whispered. "Far beyond where we should be," Elias replied. At last, the stairway ended in a chamber of black rock. Torches flared to life as they entered, not by hand, but as if their presence was expected. The room was circular, with high ceilings and walls lined with mummified figures. Robed monks, arms crossed over sunken chests, their mouths sewn shut with gold thread. At the center stood a stone table, and atop it, a book bound in flesh. Elias approached slowly. His hand trembled as he reached for the book. But before he could touch it, a voice echoed, not from a mouth, but from within his own mind. "Welcome back, Elias." He froze. Marek turned, alarmed. "What was that?" Elias whispered, a voice I hoped never to hear again. The torches burned brighter. The walls shifted, not physically, but like something beneath the stone was stirring. And then one of the mummified monks moved, not a twitch, a full, deliberate turn of the head. Its golden threaded mouth split and a hollow voice emerged. "You are the last of us, Elias. The final lock and the key." Elias staggered back. "No, I was a child. You were dead. The fire was the seal. You survived it, but not untouched. You carry it still, beneath your skin." Elias looked down at his hands, trembling. He remembered the nightmares, the black veins that crawled up his arms when he was angry, the moments of silence when he prayed and something else answered. Marek stepped between him and the talking corpse. "We destroy the book now." Elias hesitated. His heart beat like thunder. He reached for his crucifix, but his hand stopped midway. "Frozen." "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "It's bound to me. The seal. If I destroy it, I destroy myself." A low rumbling sound echoed from below. The very stone groaned. The walls whispered in that forgotten tongue. The book opened on its own, pages turning in the still air, and on one page was Elias's name written in blood. Elias stared at the page. There was his name, Elias Morvant, written in a language older than Latin, yet perfectly understood by his mind. It shimmered in wet blood, as though freshly written. "What is this?" he whispered. The golden-stitched corpse spoke again, voice like dust on glass. "The contract you never signed, but were born into." Marek glanced at Elias. "What's he saying?" Elias couldn't answer. His hand hovered over the name, shaking. As if compelled by some force, his fingers touched the page, and in an instant the world around them vanished. They were standing in a memory, a monastery on fire. Young Elias stood barefoot in the ashes, watching as black-cloaked figures dragged a screaming priest into the chapel. He was barely 6 years old. "Seal the door," someone shouted. "It's in him now. The child is the vessel." Candles flickered. Salt was thrown in a circle around Elias. One of the monks cried out, "The flame is awake!" And then darkness. When the vision ended, Elias collapsed to his knees in the crypt, breathing ragged. "It was real," he whispered. "All of it. I wasn't just a survivor, I was chosen," said the corpse. Marek's face paled. "You mean they put something inside you?" "Not something," Elias murmured. "Someone." He looked at Marek, eyes full of dread. "There's a being bound to my soul, a piece of an old god. That's what the fire was, a sealing ritual." Suddenly the book snapped shut. The golden threads in the corpses' mouths glowed faintly. The entire crypt shook. The voice whispered one final phrase. "If the vessel breaks, the flame returns." Elias stood, dizzy. "We need to leave, now." But the trapdoor had vanished. Stone walls pressed closer, and one of the monks stepped off the wall, not a corpse now, but something half living, half possessed. Its eyes burned like dying coals. It raised a hand and the torches went out. Darkness fell like a curtain. Elias raised his crucifix, but it sparked with dark light. Marek drew his knife. "You lead," he muttered. "I'll keep them off you." "There is no exit," Elias said. "Then we make one." They ran. Downward, through catacombs lined with skulls and ancient bones. Behind them came the shuffling of feet, the rasp of claws, and above them the sound of chanting. As though the walls themselves remembered the ritual, Elias's hand bled where the book had burned him, and the blood was moving, drawing symbols of its own. "It's waking," Elias whispered. "The god inside me. It's waking." Their boots splashed through shallow water. The corridor twisted endlessly, carved from basalt and soot-blackened stone. The air grew thick, not just with dust, but with centuries of silence, heavy like breath caught in a dying chest. Marek led the way now, dagger drawn, eyes scanning the shifting shadows. Behind them, Elias moved slower, every step dragging, not from exhaustion, but from something inside him awakening. "You're limping," Marek whispered. "It's not my legs," Elias said. "It's the weight. Something is stirring inside me." The wound on his hand, where the book had burned him, was no longer bleeding. Now it pulsed, and from it came a voice, not aloud but deeper, inside his veins. "They locked me in you, little priest. Now you run from the very chains that keep you whole." Elias stumbled. "Is speaking to me." Marek turned. "What is?" "The god, or a fragment of it. The piece sealed in me." "Can you shut it out?" "No, but I can try not to answer." But the whisper grew stronger, curling like smoke under Elias's skin. They reached a large chamber, shaped like a spiral eye, and on the far wall, carved into the stone, was a mirror, but not one of glass, a polished black stone, shimmering slightly. "What is this?" Marek asked. Elias stepped forward. The mirror reflected nothing, not Marek, not Elias, only the room behind them, and then it shifted. The reflection showed Elias as a child, walking the halls of a burning monastery. But this time, he wasn't running. He was laughing. "No," Elias whispered. "That's not what happened." The voice replied, "Memory lies, but blood remembers." Suddenly, Marek screamed. Elias spun and saw a hand reach from the wall, covered in ash, grabbing Marek's shoulder. From the stone, bodies began to emerge. Old monks, half-formed, flesh fused with rock. Their mouths were open, eyes empty, whispering, "Return to the fire. Return to the seal." Elias reached for his crucifix, but it burned hot in his hand, as if rejecting his touch. The voice in his blood laughed. "Even your relics know what you are." Marek slashed at the hands grabbing him, breaking free. "We can't fight all of them," he shouted. "We don't have to," Elias said, eyes locked on the mirror. "It's a doorway." To what? To where this all began. Without hesitating, Elias stepped into the mirror. It was like falling through fire. Pain, not of flesh, but of soul. Screams, not his own, tore through his head. And when he opened his eyes, he stood once more in the chapel ruins of the monastery. But in the past, he saw the fire beginning, the monks chanting, and at the altar, a boy, himself. But someone else stood there too, a man with no face, wreathed in flames. "You shouldn't have come back," the figure said. "I didn't come by choice," Elias replied. "Then kneel and remember." The fire surged, consuming the chapel, and Elias screamed. The chapel was burning. But Elias did not feel heat. He felt memory. Everything was clearer than any dream. The boy himself knelt on the altar stone, arms outstretched, mouth open in a silent scream. Surrounding him were the monks, robed in crimson and ash, chanting in a language forgotten by men but remembered by blood. By blood be bound, by fire be sealed, by name be erased. And in the center of it all stood the faceless man, taller than any man, shadowed in flame, his voice neither loud nor soft, but absolute. This child is not a host. He is the hearth. The fire must not die. He reached forward and touched the boy's forehead. Elias, watching from the present, screamed as he felt the touch across time. The boy arched, and from his chest poured light, not golden, but crimson white, like flame mixed with bone. "In the moment of breaking," the faceless man said, "a new name will rise." The monks replied in unison, "Eleazar?" Elias fell to his knees. "That's my true name," he whispered, "not Elias. Eleazar. That's the name they gave me when they bound the god." The chapel began to shatter, flames turning to ash, time collapsing. He stood once more in the ruined cathedral, back in the present, and the mirror behind him cracked. Marek rushed to him. "Where did you go? You vanished, just disappeared into the stone." Elias grabbed his arm. "It's all real. The rituals, the seal, the name, I saw it, I lived it." His hand was still glowing faintly, pulsing with heat. "They didn't just bind the god to me. They erased my name, myself. Elias is a false shell." Marek frowned. "You're still you." "No, I'm what they made me. A vessel with a name that burns." Suddenly, the whisper returned, louder now, more eager. "Say it. Speak the true name. Let the fire know you again." Elias's lips parted involuntarily, but Marek grabbed his face. Don't give it power. Whatever it's asking, resist it." Elias blinked. Sweat dripped down his brow. "It's getting harder." Around them, the stone walls began to shake again. The corpses stirred in the darkness. "Eleazar," they whispered. The name was awakening them. Marek unsheathed his dagger. "Then we fight our way out. Again." But Elias raised a hand. "No, we don't fight." He stepped forward, toward the chanting corpses. His voice rang through the crypt, louder than the whispers. "Be still. I am the hearth. I am the name that burned." And the corpses froze, every one of them, unmoving, watching. Elias stepped into the center of them. "You are remnants, fragments of a ritual long broken. You remember me. I command you." The corpses bowed. Marek gasped. "You're controlling them?" "No," Elias said softly. "I am reclaiming what was taken. The fire was never theirs. It's always been mine." The path opened. Stone shifted. An ancient stairway appeared, winding upward. Elias turned to Marek. Come, we're not running anymore. We go to where this ends. Where's that? Where the last flame was buried. The mountain of cinders. They walked in silence for a long time, the stairway twisting like a serpent's spine. Behind them, the crypt whispered, but the voices no longer followed. Elias had silenced them, for now. As they climbed higher, the air grew dry, dustier, until the smell of burnt stone became overwhelming. They emerged through a cracked archway into open air. Before them, stretching for miles in all directions, was a dead landscape, black soil, twisted stumps of once trees, and above it all, a mountain that smoked like a dying god, the mountain of cinders. Marek let out a low breath. This place isn't on any map. Elias nodded. It never was. It existed before names, before kingdoms. They began walking toward it, their boots crunching over glass like ash. The sky here was strange, always twilight, no sun, no moon, no stars, just a slow swirl of gray and red. As they approached the base, Elias spoke. This is where they buried it, not just the god, the truth, the fire, all of it. Marek looked at him. And you're going to uncover it? No, Elias said. I'm going to become it, or die. The climb began. The mountain was not made of stone. It was made of bone ash, burned trees, crumbled ruins. Every step felt like stepping on ancient suffering. As they neared the summit, Elias heard the whisper again, but now it came from within. You are close, Elizar, close to the furnace heart. Speak, burn, reclaim. He didn't answer. At the top was a flat plateau, and at its center, a cracked stone circle half buried in soot. Old symbols lined its edge, some glowing faintly. Elias stepped into it. Flames sparked along the cracks. This is it, he said, the seal. Marek approached. It's still active? Barely, but it remembers me. Elias raised his hands. The flames flared. From the cracks, shapes rose. Shadows of priests screaming in forgotten tongues. One stepped forward. Its mouth did not move, but Elias heard the words inside his mind. You cannot return. You were severed, broken. Your flame is impure. Elias met its burning gaze. It is mine, broken or not. Then you must prove it. The wind died, the mountain groaned, and the stone circle ignited. From beneath it, a form began to rise. Tall, gaunt, skeletal, its ribs glowing like coals, its head crowned with fire. Marek stepped back. What is that? Elias's eyes widened. The Warden of the Flame. The creature roared, voice like an eruption. Its claws struck toward Elias. He raised his hands, and flame answered. Fire burst from his palm, colliding with the Warden's strike. The blast threw both of them back. Elias staggered, then stood, mouth bleeding. This is what you've been guarding? My birthright? The Warden charged. They clashed. Fire on fire, memory against memory. Each strike Elias made brought another vision. Monks chanting over him as a child, his father screaming as he was taken, the faceless man raising the brand, his own eyes, reflecting flame. He fell again, but this time he didn't rise. The Warden loomed over him. You are weak, false. No, Elias whispered. His hand clenched the ashes beneath him. I was broken, but now I burn because I choose to. He slammed his palm to the ground. A ring of fire exploded outward, consuming the Warden. The scream shook the mountain. And when the smoke cleared, only Elias remained, kneeling in the circle, surrounded by silence. Marek ran to him. You won? Elias looked up. His eyes were burning. No, I remembered. The seal cracked open beneath him. A stairway descended into red light. Now we go down, to the heart of the flame. The descent began in silence. The staircase wound downward into crimson stone, heat rising with every step. The very air shimmered, dense and heavy like breathing through boiling water. Marek wiped sweat from his brow. It's like descending into the lungs of a volcano. Elias said nothing. His hands were still glowing faintly, not with magic, but memory. After a long stretch, they reached a cavernous chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness, the floor cracked with glowing lines of magma. Fire licked at the edges, but it did not burn them. "This place," Marek whispered, "it's alive." Elias nodded. "It's the furnace of the first flame. It doesn't burn wood or coal. It burns belief." Marek frowned. "Belief?" "The kind that built temples, that called stars gods, that gave the first priest his voice." As Elias stepped into the chamber, the flames moved, like they recognized him. From the magma, shapes began to rise. Figures made of fire, some with wings, some with horns, others with hollow eyes. "What are they?" Marek whispered. "Echoes," Elias replied. "What came before? What was cast down here?" One of them, a massive molten creature with 1,000 eyes, stepped forward. Its voice cracked like breaking stone. "You return, child of ash. Have you come to claim the flame or be consumed by it?" Elias didn't flinch. "I've come to understand it, to remember what was forgotten." Then step into the core, alone. A spiral path opened across the magma, leading to a pedestal of blackened stone in the center of the chamber. Elias turned to Marek. "You wait here." "Elias, this is something only I can face." Marek hesitated, then nodded. Elias walked the spiral path. The air grew heavier. His thoughts blurred. Voices not his own whispered in his ears. Priests, demons, forgotten gods. His skin cracked with heat, but he kept walking. Finally, he reached the pedestal. Upon it was a flame, small, pale gold, and silent, but it watched him. He knelt. "Are you the first flame?" he whispered. The flame did not answer with words. It answered with visions. He saw a world of darkness before fire, a single spark birthed by desperation and prayer, men burning themselves alive to feed it, a temple grown from ash, a priest, the first, holding the flame in cupped hands. And then Elias saw himself, younger, eyes wide with fear and faith, holding a similar flame. "You were chosen," the voice came, "not from the flame, but within Elias. But you were also broken." He remembered. The faceless man, the rite of severing, the branding of the tongue, the burning of his village. He had been made to forget. Now, in the presence of the first flame, he remembered all. Tears hissed on his burning cheeks. "I don't want to be its slave," he whispered. "Then don't. Be its keeper." Elias reached out. His hand touched the flame. It did not burn. It entered him. His eyes flared gold. The cavern roared. When Elias returned across the path, Marek stumbled back in awe. Elias's cloak fluttered in invisible heat. His eyes burned like miniature suns. "What happened?" Marek asked. Elias looked at him, and his voice sounded older, fuller, like a choir behind a single man. "I remembered who I am and what I carry." Behind them, the molten creatures bowed. The first flame had chosen its bearer, but far above something stirred. The seal was broken. The light had returned, and so had what had once been banished. Above the furnace, the village of Rauchstein was silent. The smoke that had once curled from chimneys now hovered, unmoving, thick, black, and unnatural. No birds sang. No wind stirred. It was as though the air itself was holding its breath. At the edge of the forest, a child stood alone. His eyes were pure white. His lips moved, but no sound came. And beneath the soil, something opened its eyes. Back within the depths, Elias climbed from the furnace, the fire now flickering behind his irises. Marek followed silently, watching the subtle glow in the priest's veins. "You've changed," Marek said. "No," Elias replied. "I've remembered." The stone beneath them quivered, faint but undeniable. Elias turned sharply. "We woke something." A low, thunderous pulse echoed from below, as if the mountains themselves had begun to breathe. They emerged from the ruins into a world changed. The sky was tinged red. The sun was pale and cold. Crows flew in circles but never landed. In the distance, smoke rose from Rauchstein, not chimney smoke, but the smoke of burning wood and flesh. Marek broke into a run. Elias followed, the fire within him whispering in warning. When they reached the village, they found no people, just ash. Buildings still stood, but shadows moved within them, wrong, flickering shapes that mimicked life but lacked souls. Elias drew the relic from his robes, the silver cross etched with flame. As it touched the air, the shadows screamed, not with sound, but with a pressure that made their ears bleed. Then silence fell. From the church tower a figure descended, a child, the same child from the forest. But now his eyes bled black tears. His voice, when it came, was older than time. You carry the first flame. Elias narrowed his eyes. And you are no child, correct? The thing smiled. I am the sleeper beneath the dust, born before your gods, buried beneath your churches. But your fire has called me forth. The ground trembled. All around them graves split open. From the soil rose not corpses, but dust, shaped like men, with hollow eyes and mouths full of worms. Marek drew his blade. Elias! Hold. Elias stepped forward. The sleeper extended a hand. Give me the flame, priest, return it, and I shall leave your world untouched. Elias looked into the hollow eyes of the child-shaped horror. Then, he smiled. No. The relic in his hand burst into fire, and the battle began. The dust creatures swarmed, their bodies collapsing and reforming like sandstorms in flesh. Marek moved like a whirlwind, slicing through them, but they did not die. Elias stood in the center of the chaos, eyes burning, hands raised. He began to chant. Not in Latin, not in any human tongue. It was older. Syllables from before written language, carried through fire. The flame in his chest flared outward, forming a circle of golden heat. The creatures that touched it dissolved, their screams echoing into ash. The sleeper snarled, his face cracking to reveal something serpentine underneath. You defy the old laws. They were written in dust, Elias replied, and dust burns. The ground split open. Fire roared from beneath, catching the dust things in a cleansing blaze. But it wasn't enough. The sleeper raised both arms. The sky turned black, and from it descended chains, made of bone, soaked in blood, etched with the names of forgotten angels. They wrapped around Elias, dragging him down. Marek screamed his name, but Elias was calm. You think I came alone? He reached inward to the flame, to the first priest, to the voices of those who came before, they answered. The fire exploded, blinding and white, not with heat, but with memory. The chains shattered. The sleeper shrieked, its form unraveling. Elias stepped forward. You slept too long. The world no longer fears you. And with a single word, unknown and ancient, Elias sent the sleeper into dust once more. The silence returned. Only ash remained. Marek fell to his knees. You're a god now. Elias shook his head. No, just a man who remembers. But in the distance, thunder rolled. The world had felt the fire awaken, and not everything wanted it dead. For 3 days, Elias and Marek walked without speaking. The fire within Elias had quieted, not gone, but watching. Each night they saw faces in the trees, not human, not animal, but watching them. By the 4th day, they reached the valley of Grensha Hollow, a dead village untouched by rot, but utterly wrong. The air here tasted like rust and teeth. This place doesn't want us, Marek said. That makes 2 of us, Elias answered, and stepped into the hollow. In the center stood a house. It had no windows, no doors, no visible way in, and yet the smoke curled from a chimney, and from within they heard, Father. Elias froze. It was a child's voice, familiar, too familiar. He stepped forward. Marek grabbed his shoulder. Don't, this reeks of the deep. I know, Elias said, voice strained, but that voice is my son's. Marek stared, horrified. You said your son... He died years ago. But the voice came again, stronger this time. Father, please, it's dark, I'm cold. The house trembled. Elias closed his eyes. He saw fire. He saw blood. He saw a crib, empty, in a burning house. And he stepped forward. The house opened, not like a door, more like flesh tearing open. Inside, darkness pulsed. and from it emerged a form, small, childlike. Elias's knees buckled. Malik. The boy looked up. His eyes were hollow. "Why didn't you save me, Father?" "I tried," Elias whispered. "You let me burn?" Malik's sword was in his hand now. "Elias, this isn't real. It's bait." But Elias was trembling. The boy's face split, not with pain, but with a grin that stretched too wide, too sharp. Then the truth bled through. It wasn't his son. It had never been his son. It was a skinwalker shaped by Elias's grief, and it leapt. The house sealed behind them. Within, time folded. Walls bent. Gravity shifted. Marek fought in a spiraling room where the ceiling blinked and the floor bled. Elias, inside a mirror chamber, faced not one skinwalker, but hundreds. All versions of his son's face, each asking the same question: "Why did you let me die?" He could not speak. The fire in his veins writhed, angry, confused, weakened by guilt. The skinwalkers circled. They didn't touch him. They fed off his shame. And the more they fed, the brighter they became. But then, something changed. Elias looked past the faces, to himself, to the moment he first held Malik, to the night of the fire, to his own hands, broken and bleeding, trying to claw through flame. He did try. He failed, but he tried. "I didn't abandon you," he said. The fire responded. The relic in his robes burst with holy flame, pure and golden. The skinwalkers shrieked, caught in the truth. Their faces melted. The illusion collapsed. And the house howled. Marek broke through the last wall. Inside, Elias stood in a ring of fire, hands raised, the boy's shadow burning in gold. "Are you back?" Marek asked, panting. Elias nodded. "And I remember." "Remember what?" "Grief is not a weakness." The house collapsed in silence, not an explosion, but a surrender. And when it was gone, only grass remained untouched. They left Grensha Hollow behind, but the journey changed them. Elias walked straighter now, not lighter, but anchored. The fire within no longer flickered. It shaped him. And far ahead, the mountains whispered of the next trial. Something ancient was stirring in the cold north, something that remembered Elias's name. The lake was not on any map. It had no name. The locals, when asked, only muttered, "We don't speak of the water, it listens." Even the birds avoided it. Still, Elias and Marek approached the black water of the unnamed lake. It stretched wide and silent as if holding its breath. At its center stood a half-submerged stone chapel, cracked and leaning, its cross inverted and barely visible in the fog. "A church," Marek whispered, "or what's left of one." "There's something underneath," Elias said. "I feel it." And the lake answered. From beneath the still surface, a single lantern flickered, then another, then 10, a dozen, 100, each flame drifting just below the water like floating souls, each one whispering a different name. One of them said Elias. At night they camped by the shore. Elias did not sleep. The lanterns glowed brighter now, and he saw faces beneath them, pale, wide-eyed, mouths agape, frozen mid-scream. The dead did not rest here. "I dreamt of drowning," Marek said suddenly. "But it wasn't water, it was memories." Elias said nothing. His hands trembled. He'd seen that chapel before. Not in life, but in a vision, long ago, during his first exorcism. It was where the order buried things they couldn't destroy, things that watched from the deep. On the second night, Elias entered the lake. He waded waist deep into the freezing black until one lantern floated toward him. Inside it flickered not fire, but a heartbeat. And then a voice. "Welcome back, Prit Father." It wasn't a demon. It wasn't human. It was the echo of an old god, bound in water and memory, its voice born of every soul drowned here. "We remember you." The water pulled him under. Elias saw everything. The forgotten rituals, the drowned priests, the first sins of the order, those who silenced children's cries with holy salt and buried relics in mud. The church had turned heresy into holiness, and the lake had watched it all. The God beneath, not evil, not good, only memory, eternal and vengeful. It showed Elias the truth. His own hands, younger, held a relic that burned clean, not to save, but to silence. He had buried the truth once, and now it had risen for judgment. Marek dove in and found Elias deep beneath, locked in memory, unmoving. He dragged him up, gasping, eyes wide, mouth muttering a single phrase. We made it all. The lanterns circled them both now, and from the chapel's sunken door a figure crawled forth. Wet, blind, wearing a broken priest's collar. A brother of the first flame, Elias whispered. He never died, Marek said. He waited. The thing raised its hand, not in threat, but in recognition, and around its neck hung the original sigil of the order, blackened and cracked. Judgment begins here, it rasped, and none are clean. The lanterns rose from the water like fireflies, and for the first time Elias feared the light. The monk was not alive. His body moved, yes, dragging across the wet stones of the drowned chapel, but no breath fogged the air around him. No heartbeat. Only the sigil around his neck pulsed with each step. Who are you? Elias asked, voice brittle. I was the first flame, the thing rasped. I am the last. Its skin was pale like candle wax, peeling, soaked in the lake's memory. Eyes hollow. But its voice, that was filled with fire. The lake fed me. Memory shaped me. And now I speak for the ones who sank. Inside the chapel, the walls wept water. The air tasted of mildew and prayers long abandoned. There was no altar, only a stone table carved with runes Elias recognized from the forbidden pages of the Codex Infernum. Atop it rested a book, wrapped in black skin, stitched shut with wire. The Book of Hunger. It did not speak with words. It radiated desire, need, an ancient hunger, older than any demon Elias had faced. This was never made by man, Marek muttered. No, Elias replied, but men worshipped what made it. The monk, the last brother of the first flame, knelt before the book. You came to bind the evil, he said, but it was never evil. It feeds, Elias said. That is enough. So do you. That stopped him. You feed on guilt, on salvation, on the need to be needed. The chapel shook as the lake above churned. You wear robes, the monk growled, but you burn like the rest. And then he opened the book, not with hands, but with memory. Visions clawed at Elias's mind. A town that never was, drowning in sand. Children born with closed mouths and open eyes. Churches with no doors, only whispers. And at the center, a mouth without end. The book was not a spell, it was a summoning. It did not call demons, it called absence, void, the endless gnawing space left behind when the soul is eaten. Elias turned to Marek, but Marek was already staring, transfixed, lips mumbling prayers in a tongue that no longer existed. The hunger was speaking through him. Elias, you fed it too, long ago, remember? And he did. The first village, the first exorcism, the first time he cast out a demon not with rites, but with a bargain. He hadn't saved that girl. He had fed her fear to something older than hell. The chapel cracked. A long black tongue of void slipped through the ceiling, winding around the monk, lifting him into the air. He did not scream. He smiled. It's here, he whispered. It's always been here. The book pulsed. Marek convulsed, and a scream tore through his throat. Not pain, not fear, but reverence. The monk's body shattered into ash, and in his place a figure stood, tall, faceless, its ribs open like pages. Inside them, names written in light, names Elias had tried to forget. The hunger had a face now. Elias drew his blade, but the blade bent, wilted, rusting in his hands. No weapon made of steel could touch this. Only truth. He stepped forward. No prayers, no blessings. Just a whisper. I remember what I did. The chapel went silent. The figure paused. The hunger stilled. And then it screamed, not in rage, but in recognition. The Book of Hunger burned, but it did not die. The chapel collapsed around them. Elias grabbed Merrick, dragged him to the surface as the lake roared and swallowed itself. The lanterns vanished. Only the sigil remained, floating on the surface, warm and pulsing, a gift or a curse. That night Elias could not sleep, because in the darkness he still heard it. Feed me? 3 days after the lake drowned itself, Elias found the road. Not just any road, the old road. Twisting through pine forest blackened by time, it led to a place the villagers only whispered of, St. Avian's Asylum, once a refuge for the mad and tormented. Now it lay abandoned, wrapped in rusted gates and ivy. But Elias had been summoned, not by mail, not by voice, but by a dream. Marek stayed behind, too weak to walk. You won't find peace in that place, he warned. Elias didn't argue. He wasn't looking for peace, just answers. The air thickened the closer he got. Fog clung to the trees like wet cloth. Birdsong died. Only the wind spoke, and it whispered names. Old names? Names of the dead. The asylum was not empty. Though the doors were shattered and vines grew through broken windows, something watched from within. Elias stepped inside. The temperature dropped like a blade. Do you seek the voices too? Someone whispered. He turned. A figure sat at the end of the hall, pale, barefoot, wearing a patient's robe marked 187. She smiled, but her eyes bled shadow. They still sing in the walls, she said. Who are you? Elias asked. I was a nurse before the chorus began. The halls of St. Avian's echoed, not with footsteps, but with songs. Low, humming dirges that slithered beneath the floorboards. They call it a curse, she whispered. Yea, but it's not. It's a choir of hunger. Elias followed the sound deeper, past rusted doors and overturned beds. The air smelled of mold, bleach, and forgotten medicine. Each room he passed had mirrors, and in every mirror he saw someone else looking back. Not demons, not ghosts, himself. Older, colder, smiling. You fed it more than you think, the reflection said in unison. He reached the basement. There, the walls pulsed like breathing lungs. Moss glowed red in the dark. The sound grew louder, the choir rising, and at the center, a well. It wasn't deep, but it wasn't empty. A voice rose from it, sharp, clean, and oddly calm. I remember you. Elias froze. The voice was his own. The well showed visions, not of demons, but of choices. Each time Elias chose violence over compassion, each time he exorcised a host that could have been saved, each time he let something in just to get the job done. You do not destroy evil, the voice said. You channel it. A hand reached up from the well, his hand, and offered a rosary, blackened, burned. Take it, it said. Become honest. Elias did not take it. He stepped back. Whispers crawled into his ears. Thousands of voices, some begging, some laughing, some accusing. Every priest breaks eventually, they hissed. You broke long ago. Then silence. The asylum shuddered. The walls cracked and the song turned into screams. Elias ran up the stairs, down the halls, past the nurse, who now had no eyes. She sang as blood poured from her mouth. You're not the savior, she crooned. You're the invitation. Outside, the fog had thickened into something alive. It followed him, whispering his failures. He reached the edge of the woods, heart pounding. The trees hissed. Honesty is hunger, Father. Back at the camp, Marek stirred as Elias returned. His eyes widened. What followed you? Elias didn't answer. He sat down, drenched in sweat, his hand shaking. Something clinked in his pocket. He pulled it out, the blackened rosary. He had taken it after all. That night he dreamed of St. Avian's again. But this time the asylum sang his name. The morning after St. Avian's dream, Elias awoke to the sound of weeping. Not Marek. Not even human. It came from the woods, and it was close. Elias rose, eyes bleary from nightmares. He gripped the blackened rosary in his fist. Was it real? The song still echoed in his ears. He followed the sound without waking Marek. The trees parted like whispers, revealing an old stone chapel, forgotten by time. Half buried in ivy, its bell tower crooked, its stained glass windows shattered. The structure seemed to lean into the earth, as if ashamed of its presence. The weeping came from within. Elias stepped inside. The air was damp, smelling of mildew and old prayer. Sunlight pierced the broken windows like spears of fire, revealing a trail of blood leading to the altar. There, at the font where once holy water was held, a child sat, alone, crying. Naked and pale, he hugged his knees. His hair was soaked, his back marked by fresh welts. "Are you hurt?" Elias asked, voice low. The child looked up. His eyes were not those of a child. They were ancient. "They put me here," he whispered, "to forget." "Who did?" "The ones who remember too much." The child stood, and the blood at the font boiled. Elias stepped back, hand to his cross. But the child did not move, only stared. Then he pointed. "You wore black robes once," he said. "No," Elias replied. "I wore white. You wore black underneath." The blood overflowed the font. Images erupted from it, flashes of Elias's past, an orphanage burning, a demon begging for mercy, a bishop with red eyes whispering in Latin, Elias kneeling in a field of bones. The child screamed, and the windows shattered inward. From the blood rose a figure, not fully formed, a specter made of shadow and flame. Its face was Elias's, but grinning, mocking. "Truth is a mirror, Father," it growled. "You only see it when it cuts." The child was gone. The church was empty. Only Elias remained. And the thing that wore his face. They fought, not with weapons, but with memory. Each accusation the thing threw at Elias became a wound. Every guilt-laden moment returned as pain. The time he let a child die to save a priest. The time he lied to the village to keep them calm. The time he enjoyed the exorcism. "You're not pure," it hissed. "You're just useful." Elias fell to his knees. Blood poured from his eyes. But then, a light. From the cracked roof above, a real light. Warm, golden, alive. It struck the blood in the font and turned it to steam. The specter shrieked. "No, you didn't earn this." But Elias had stopped listening. He crawled forward, dipped his hand into the steaming font, and made the sign of the cross. The chapel exploded in light. When he awoke, the church was gone. Just dust, and the blackened rosary still in his hand. But something was different. He felt cleaner, not redeemed, not saved, just lighter. He returned to camp. Marek was gone. But a note had been left behind. It followed me instead. "Keep going." Elias didn't cry. He simply turned toward the next mountain. Behind him, in the trees, a child's voice whispered, "You still wear black beneath the white." Snow fell like ash. The wind howled as Elias climbed the frozen trail, his boots sinking into drifts waist deep. Each breath came ragged. His hands, though gloved, were stiff with frost. The mountains of Krestova were no longer part of any map. They belonged to the forgotten and to something older than faith. 3 days since Marek vanished. 3 nights with no fire for fear of being seen. 3 dreams filled with the same face. Not a demon this time, but a woman. Eyes veiled, mouth sewn shut, but her voice still reached him. He waits where prayers rot. On the 4th day, Elias found it. A monastery buried under snow. The roof barely visible. Only the highest bell tower stood like a jagged tooth against the gray sky. A centuries-old sigil was carved into the ice-covered stone. He traced it with shaking fingers. Sanctum Umbrae, Sanctuary of Shadows. He descended. Inside, the cold was absolute and too quiet. Snow had drifted into the nave, bearing pews and altars alike. Candles lay broken, their wax fused with frozen bones. Elias lit a lantern. Its golden glow revealed faded murals, saints with faces scratched out, demons bowing in prayer. Then he heard it, a chant, far below. He followed it, down spiral steps slick with ice, past cells filled with bones in prayer, past walls carved with names. scratched out by claws. The chant grew louder until he reached a door of black wood. No handle, just a hole where something had once been removed. A hand? A relic? A soul? Elias touched it. The chanting stopped, then the scratching. From within, like nails on stone, then something tapped back. He whispered a prayer. "Deliver us not into—" But the door opened itself. Beyond was a crypt. Its walls pulsed with veins of red ice. Statues lined its perimeter, monks with their mouths torn open. In the center stood a well of obsidian filled with water black as ink. Floating on the surface, a nun's corpse. Hands bound, eyes wide open. She whispered, though dead, "You're too late." The walls shook. From the far side something stirred. Chains clanked. A deep voice, not human, spoke in the old tongue. Elias stepped back. The corpse rose. Its mouth opened wider than bone should allow. "You'll take his place now," it hissed. From the well, a figure emerged. He was robed, faceless, but wearing a crown made of human teeth. "Father Elias," it said, "I've waited since your first lie." Elias raised his crucifix, but the thing laughed. "This is not your tool anymore." It snapped the cross in midair with a thought. Elias screamed. The walls began to bleed. Red water flowed toward him. He grabbed salt from his satchel, drew a circle, chanted, "Sanctum Deo, libera me." The circle ignited. The crowned figure screamed. The corpse burned in silent agony. The walls cracked. The entire monastery collapsed inward. Hours later, Elias crawled from the ruins, bloodied and shivering. Above him, the snowstorm had stopped. The sky, black. The stars, wrong. They had shifted, realigned, as if something had been unlocked. He looked down. On his palm, where salt had burned skin, was a mark, a crown of teeth. And from the wind, the voice of the nun whispered again, "You only thought you were hunting demons, but they've always been hunting you." The mark on Elias's palm never faded. It burned when he prayed. It itched when he slept. And at night it whispered. Words from a forgotten tongue, a summoning. But Elias didn't stop. The monastery had given him more than pain. It had shown him something, a map, burned into the flesh of the nun's corpse, a path leading to a place that once wasn't supposed to exist. Thistle Hollow. It took him 6 days. The road was broken. The snow fell harder than ever. Animals avoided the path. Birds stopped singing. Even the trees leaned away from the direction he traveled. And finally he saw it, a village nestled in a ravine, surrounded by crooked hills and bare woods. No smoke from chimneys, no sound but the crunch of his boots. Thistle Hollow was dead, or so he thought. A bell rang as he passed the first house, faint, rusted. Then another and another. He turned and saw nothing, but the air grew heavy, thick with rot and regret. Children's toys sat in the snow, frozen in play. A woman's shoe, a blood-stained scarf nailed to a door. Then a voice. "You shouldn't be here, Father." He turned and saw a man, old, hunched, with one eye stitched shut. His skin looked burnt, as if from the inside. "I seek no harm," Elias said, "only answers." "There are no answers here," the man rasped, "only punishment." Elias showed him the mark. The old man's mouth trembled. He backed away. "You carry his mark," he whispered. "Whose?" But the man fled, limping between abandoned buildings. Inside the village chapel, Elias found the truth. The altar had been defaced, the crucifix upside down, and in place of the holy font, a pit filled with bones, children, women, priests. Above it, scrawled in blood. They made us drink the ash. Elias knelt, feeling bile rise in his throat. He opened his book of rites, ready to bless the pit, but the pages were soaked with tears. His own? The book cried. Suddenly footsteps, a child's giggle. He turned, but saw no one, only a small wooden mask on the floor, grinning. He picked it up. It was warm. Then it laughed. "Do you want to see what they buried?" The world twisted. The chapel warped. Walls oozed with black water. Pews split open like flesh. And the pit opened. From it they came, dozens. Children, once human, now bone-thin and eyeless. One wore a wedding dress soaked in blood. Another dragged chains behind her, and at the center stood a child-sized figure in a priest's robe, its face covered in masks, one over the other. It spoke in a voice too deep for any child. They burned us to save their souls. And now you wear the crown of their guilt. Elias raised his remaining crucifix, but it melted in his hand. Salt turned to sand. Prayers turned to ash. He fell to his knees. I didn't know, he whispered. I wasn't part of it. All who come here are part of it, because you heard them cry and you kept walking. The masked priest child opened its arms. From behind it, the village's dead reached out. They didn't scream. They sang. He will return. He will reign. He will rebuild. Elias screamed as they pulled him in, and then to silence. He woke in the snow outside the chapel, alone, but on his chest was a second mark, next to the crown of teeth, a small wooden mask carved into his flesh. And on the chapel door someone had written in blood, "One sin remembered opens the door for the next." Elias could no longer pray. The words of Scripture died in his throat like ash. Holy water sizzled on his skin. Each mark on his body, the crown of teeth, the wooden mask, the lash across his back, told a story. But they weren't just scars. They were seals. And something beneath his flesh had begun to wake. He wandered for days. Not to hunt, but to flee. The voice in his head no longer sounded like guilt. It sounded like guidance. They crowned you. They anointed you. You were never meant to save them. You were meant to replace them. In a ruined cathedral on the edge of the world, he found what he didn't know he was looking for. A mirror, cracked, covered in dust, but it showed him clearly, not himself, but the thing behind his eyes. It wore vestments of human skin. Its halo was a ring of infant jaws, and its voice was his own, echoing from within. Your flock awaits, Elias screamed. He smashed the mirror, but the image remained in every shard, and the voice grew louder, so he ran. The next village he reached was called Verloren. It was already too late. Smoke rose from homes. People lay in the streets, their mouths sewn shut. The dead grinned, and in their blood someone had written, "He walks among us." The villagers welcomed him, not with fear, but with prayer. They knelt as he passed. Children kissed his bloody hands. And from the chapel the new priest emerged, a boy, wearing a mask. He knelt before Elias and offered him a book, bound in skin, written in blood. "We waited," the boy said. "You are the last to fall and the first to rise." Elias opened it. Inside were the names of every soul he'd failed to save, and at the bottom, one last space. His own? He wept, not out of sorrow, but because it all finally made sense. That night, Elias gave his final sermon. He stood at the altar, robed in ash, eyes glowing faintly. The villagers watched, silent, eager, obedient. And Elias spoke. They asked for mercy, but we were not sent to give it. We were sent to bear witness, to the cleansing, to the reclamation. Then he raised his hands, and from the walls the demons emerged, not as beasts, but as memories, as the faces of every person Elias had watched die. They walked among the villagers, whispering names. No one screamed, no one ran, because they were home. Elias descended from the altar. He knelt before the pit behind the church. He whispered a single word, "Amen," and the pit opened. One final time, what rose was neither angel nor devil, but something new, something made of faith, failure, and fire. It looked like Elias, it smiled like Elias, but its eyes held only hunger. Some say the church still stands, that once a year a mass is held there, in tongues no one remembers, by people with no shadows. And if you listen close enough to the wind, you can hear his sermon begin again. Let us pray. The rain is still falling, but the story is over. Not because the darkness is gone, but perhaps because it is watching you now. We have just passed through a foggy road, where the boundary between reality and illusion, life and death, is as thin as a breath under the rainy night sky. What are you thinking right now? What did you feel during this story? Leave a comment. Let me know you are still here and not yet swallowed by the darkness. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next storm, because I will be back with more whispers from the other side of the door you never dared to open. I'm the storyteller in the rain, and tonight you listened. Thank you.